I want to thank Bishop Bartosik and Reverend Joyce, Dan Brady, classmates of Bill, for this chance to share St. Gertrude's love song with Bill Kenneally. Let's begin this homily the way Father Bill began every Sunday homily. He preached through 22 years of ministry at St. Gertrude's. Before Mass, he would come out that sacristy door. He would sit in the altar server's chair, out of sight, positioned halfway between the pulpit and the altar. And then he'd plant his feet on the floor, put his elbows on his knees, clasp his hands, interlacing his fingers, close his eyes, and bow his head. He'd be quiet there, maybe for a minute or two, and he bent like a supplicant, like a poet over a blank page, like an angel bending before the glory of God. So let's start the way Father Bill did. Plant your feet. Put your elbows on your knees. Clasp your hands. Interlace your fingers. Shut your eyes. Bow your head to your heart and be quiet. Right there. That's where Bill began. That was his wellspring. The headwaters where the mighty river of poetry, wisdom, humor, creativity, and healing love began. This celebration of Bill's life couldn't be more perfectly placed. It straddles two great Catholic feasts, the feasts of All Saints and All Souls. Bill probably planned this. Liturgically speaking, our feet are planted on the ground and our heads and our hearts beat with the saints in the realm of love. Bill once remarked that at this time of year, as the bounty of summer gives way to the fiery farewell of autumn, the boundary between earth and heaven is membrane thin, almost permeable. Each side can practically touch the other. That's where Bill lived, in the permeable membrane, planted in the middle of the 1,000,001 stories of our restless souls, head and heart beating in time with the angels in the realm of love. Now that sort of thing can make you a little different. And make no doubt about it, Father Bill Kenneally was a little different, a little quirky, marvelously off-center, thrillingly original, like a genius. Father Bill was a genius pastor, and we, St. Gertrude Parish, we're a little different too. Marvelously off-center. We're crazy in love with Bill. The last liturgy Bill presided as pastor was on June 5th, 2006. Pentecost Sunday. It was our goodbye to Bill. And this is how we celebrated. At a given signal, after communion, all of us put this in front of our faces. We waved them back and forth and up and down. An entire church. They were like Kenneally-shaped tongues of fire. A sure sign that Bill was going, but God's Spirit would abide, as it does to this instant. You feel it, right? Now, Bill Kenneally was funny. His humor was quick and mischievous, frequently jaw-dropping, always laugh-out-loud hilarious. Once he got on a roll, we thought he would never quit. The parish council wanted to give the altar servers a snare drum and cymbal so they could hit a rim shot after every joke. Boom. On the Sunday that Father Bill returned to us after a long and scary hospitalization for colon cancer, he began his homily by saying, "A lot of you are asking, how you doing? How's it going?" Bill paused and then said, "Depends." Although they resectioned his colon, they didn't miss with his funny bone. And that's Father Bill, mischievous, humble, reassuring, and slip on a banana peel funny. Leon Bloy says that joy is the most unmistakable sign of God's presence. That was Bill. He was funny not for funny's sake, he was funny for God's sake. God's reign's a comedy. Everything works out in the end. Bill didn't suffer fools. He called people out, politicians, culture, the church, for practices that made no sense, that in the name of God diminished and hurt people. And he was fearless as he was insightful. It was liberating for us to hear from the pulpit what we thought and spoke to each other in private. And most importantly, Bill was not a complainer. He was a doer. In many ways, his innovations at Gertz were examples of what a parish should and could be. As Casey Conway said, Bill dreamed a church where I belonged. He did that for us all. The list of Bill's innovations are beatitude beautiful. Parish synod, preaching team, heart-to-heart ministry, small faith communities, repurposing the convent as a shelter, the parish synods, growing in faith. And in some ways, his best gift to the generations, renovating this church, polishing the jewel, he called it. Now, we Catholics can disagree about everything. But everyone agreed with this end product, this beautiful, holy space. Bill's hand is in every detail, and the church is as close a representation of Bill's interior castle as we can get. And so are we who gather in it. There's nothing more beautiful of the faces of parishioners who love their pastor. Bill Kenneally was the Ty Cobb of preaching. Ty Cobb was a baseball player who had, over 22 years, a batting average of almost 400. That meant he had a hit 4 out of every 10 times he batted. Best there ever was. Bill's batting average over 22 years was 900. He had a hit 9 Sundays out of 10. Sit down, Cobb. Kenneally's in the building. His preaching was a miracle. His homilies felt as improvisational as jazz. He spoke in simple sentences. He was unpredictable. You never knew where he was going. His homilies were informed by whatever he was reading, watching, or thinking about. Chesterton once remarked that Christians are bored to death with the constant repetition of a story they've never heard. That was never a problem with Bill. We heard the gospel for the first time every Sunday. 9 out of 10. Now, Dick Wesley, the great Loyola theologian, philosopher, and parishioner here at Gertz, recorded every Sunday homily Bill gave between 1994 and 2006. He then transcribed them, bound them up. Here's one. Homilies of Faith, 712 pages long. People bought copies of this book as a fundraiser. Many of us still read these today as inspiration, And at a time when too many homilies are forgotten by the prayer of the faithful, Bill's homilies are still touching us. His nephew John was reading Bill a homily when Bill passed away. That's called getting the last word. And the simple explanation for Bill's gift: he was a holy poet. His feet on the ground. He knew the 1,000,001 stories of our restless souls, and his head and his heart, always bowed, understood the glory of God's love that always sought to marry our hearts. And Bill was a healer. Some years ago, I hit a rough patch. I have Irish brains, prone to what Winston Churchill called the black dogs that come at midnight. Well, I had a kennel of those black dogs under my bed. And who shows up in the middle of my dark night? My pastor, Bill Kenneally. He sat on the sofa. His elbows were on his knees. His hands were clasped. His fingers interlaced. He bowed his head. I can't remember what we talked about, but he was there in his deep Kenneally way. I believe Bill struggled with his own darkness. He knew the path in and out of rough patches. He knew how souls could be wrecked and then stitched together. And that's what he did for me. That's what he did for so many of us. He was there through our rough patches with an empathy and a wisdom that shone like a lantern. He was saintly that way. With Bill, God's love was a real thing, penetrating the membrane of our grief, making things manageable, raising us up millimeter by millimeter. And on one soft summer night, June 2nd, 2012, 19-year-old Billy Tobin, the much-beloved youngest child of Mike and Dorothea, died. And the horrible news of this tragedy swept through the parish at warp speed. We went to the Tobins that morning, scattered on the lawn, on the porch, in the house, on the sidewalk, like shrapnel after a terrorist bombing. We had no idea what to do. And then Father Bill shows up, our pastor. He walked through our huddle, and we parted like the Red Sea, and he made his way straight to Mike, Dorothea, and Billy's 6 keening siblings laid out on the couch like fallen dominoes. It was the bravest, the holiest, the saintliest display of pastoring I've ever seen. And then at Billy's Mass of the Resurrection, in this beautiful polished jewel to a congregation befuddled by grief, he said, "There's a Russian writer who says our time on earth is a short passage. He uses an image of a bird flying through a house. It enters one window from the darkness, flies through the home, and it exits at the exact opposite end through another window into darkness. The time in the house is a lifetime. The darkness before and after is eternity. I think that the darkness before is the mind of God, and that the darkness after is really the bright promise of God's presence." And then he sang in a cracked whisper of a voice, a new verse he wrote to the song Charming Billy. "Can you save us all a place, Billy boy, Billy boy? Can you save us all a place, charming Billy?" Sure, there's plenty more good space, and I'll always plead your case. But I'm too young to leave my mother, a Russian writer, an Irish tune, a broken-hearted pastor, tending to the souls of his broken-hearted people, finding a way, raising us up millimeter by millimeter. And in October, Bill began his October of 2019, he began his long, final health struggle, and I visited him at Little Company of Mary. They had amputated 2 of his toes. He was wrecked by a terrible blood infection. He was a septic mess. And he told me, I think I died last night. It was only for a moment, but I was dead. And let me tell you, I was in heaven, in the vestibule. And it was beautiful, so beautiful. It's all true. Everything is true. It's so peaceful. I'm not afraid to die. Our deepest thanks and condolences goes out to the entire Kenneally clan, to William Patrick Kenneally, his dad, a Tipperary man, his mom, Mary Josephine Joyce, from County Mayo, God help us. They're on the other side with his brother Jack and his niece Kathleen, reaching through the membrane. To his nephews, John, Chris, Matt, and Mark, their spouses, extended family. He talked about you so often. And a heart and soul as robust as Father Bill's doesn't just happen, it's inherited and sustained by family. And a final word must be said about Marie, his boon companion. Marie, your love for Bill made him the priest he was for us. You have our deepest thanks and love. There's a last verse of an old folk song called The River is Wide, and it goes, build me a boat that can carry 2, and we shall row, my love and I. And Bill waits for you on the other side. And the last song we'll sing today is called No More Weeping. It's a 6-verse round like Row, Row, Row Your Boat, but holier. And we've been singing this round at the gym mass every Saturday, every Easter Sunday for over 30 years. At every Easter Sunday, when the round reached its apex and all 6 verses were going at once, coming from every part in the gym, Father Bill would move into the middle of the congregation, in the middle of the song, and throw his head back smiling and lift up his hands. And that's what Bill Kenneally, a soul no longer in the vestibule, is hearing in heaven today. God's marvelous round surrounding, enthralling, and Eastering him. He's an angel, swept up in the crazy glory of all love on the other side of the membrane, practically reaching us. Hey, Bill, love you. So let's end as we began. Put your feet on the floor, your elbows on your knees, clasp your hands, interlace your fingers, close your eyes, and bow your head, and be quiet.